So this chapter has been describing for us the tzaddik paradigm, the real righteous, pious, saintly person. And as you probably discovered in last class, and will continue in today's class, talking about the tzaddik sometimes may seem a little foreign to many of us, because most of us, myself included, we're not this tzaddik. We're talking about levels and goals and pursuits and achievements that we may not even recognize are way beyond our abilities. But we study this, at least briefly in the Tanya, because it exposes us to what is truly possible of a human being and the way that they can actually live their lives in the most perfect way. And even if we can never attain that, at least we should strive to. So we learned that there's the complete sadiq and the incomplete sadiq. The complete sadiq is somebody who's become totally overtaken, consumed by their godly soul. Every single layer and part of their persona, their mind, their heart, their thoughts, their words, their behaviors is always motivated by a holy, godly goal. There is no trace at all of their animal soul, of any bestial drive. That's the complete tzaddik. The incomplete tzaddik, we learned, has at least a tiny trace of their animal soul within them. Not enough that they'll actually ever perform a sin or something wrong, not even enough that they may ever be tempted towards doing that. But this tiny trace of the animal soul that still remains within them, sometimes they may be aware of it, sometimes they may not even be aware of it, but it affects them in a way that, as we learned, their love and their attraction towards God and towards that which is true is not 100%, but possibly 99.9%. And therefore, their rejection of that which is wrong, that which is evil, may also just be 99.9%. Now, the Alter Rebbe says that there could be many, many levels of this category of the incomplete tzaddik. Why? Because, first of all, there may be a qualitative difference between these various incomplete tzaddikim. Because this trace that remains of the animal soul may come from any of the four elements of the animal soul. We already learned that the animal soul, like everything else in this world, consists of four elements: fire, earth, wind, and water. So in one tzaddik, there may be a tiny trace of a fire element, which is why probably there may be a foreign heated passion and love and attraction towards something, or a water element, or a wind or earth element. That's a qualitative difference between many of these incomplete tzaddikim. There also may be a quantitative difference among these different tzaddikim, because how much of this trace of the animal soul still remains within them. And to explain this, the Alter Rebbe here employs a Jewish legal term, which is called bittul, nullification. So in Jewish law, for example, if you mix milk and meat together, you have a non-kosher result, non-kosher food. But what if only a tiny drop of milk fell into a meat pot? Well, that pot may not necessarily become non-kosher, because it depends on the amounts. If that drop of milk may be only 1/60th a part of the meat dish, then that 1/60th becomes totally nullified within the meat dish. It has no influence, no bearing once it becomes mixed in that pot. So Jewish law talks about this process of nullification. And there's many degrees of this. There may be nullification 1 in 60, 1 in 100, 1 in 200, 1 in 1,000. So talking about this incomplete tzaddik, how much of this trace of the animal soul still is within them? It's tiny. In fact, it's completely nullified, which is why they don't feel it. They're maybe not even aware of it, and it has no influence on them, not just not to perform the sin, but never to even desire to perform the sin. But that level of nullification may be different from one to the other. It may be in different proportions, 1 in 60, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, which is why the Gemara says that there's thousands and thousands of these tzaddikim throughout every single generation. And these are the ones, the most common tzaddik, as few as they are, but there are many of them, which are the incomplete tzaddik. With regards to the complete tzaddik, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the 2nd century in the Zohar, he says, Ra'iti b'nei aliyah v'hem mu'atim. I've seen these superior people, these people of elevation, and there's very, very few of them. He calls them b'nei aliyah, elevated people. Why does he use that term, elevated people? So the Alter Rebbe says there are two explanations how this term describes the complete tzaddik. The first explanation is that the word aliyah means to go up, to ascend, to elevate. And these tzaddikim, the complete tzaddik, has succeeded in completely refining, completely elevating, completely converting all that which is evil and bad into good. Not just eradicating, but rather elevating and transforming. So they've taken their animal soul and all of their animalistic bestial drives and emotions and temptations, and they've converted it into goodness, holiness, and godliness. Which is why the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the Zohar, in the introduction, he says that he once heard a voice. The voice came out from heaven, and it was from a special chamber in heaven, the chamber of the tzaddikim, and it says, "Who from you has succeeded in transforming darkness into light and bitterness into sweetness? You are welcome to come into here." So it's those tzaddikim they're called Bnei Aliyah. Their whole life is dedicated to elevating, to ascending, to transforming that which is wrong into that which is right, darkness into light, and bitterness into sweetness. That's the first explanation. The second explanation why they're called Bnei Aliyah, elevated superior people, is because it describes the motivation in their service to God. We have already learned that it's very important to behave in a way that is altruistic and that is genuine. And we perform things lishma. We study Torah, do a mitzvah lishma, for the sake of heaven, not for our own sake. So if ever there's a foreign agenda or a personal agenda, that is tainting the act that we do. Now, there are very terrible and very inappropriate foreign agendas. For example, if I do a mitzvah, I study Torah because I want to be famous, because I want to be popular, because I want respect, or for whatever reason. Of course, that's a very low level, not something that has any relation to the tzaddik we're describing. But there's even a very seemingly altruistic motivation that is also incomplete and not that of the tzaddik. It could be that somebody truly desires to cleave to God, truly desires to connect with Hashem, to be one with their creator. And why do they desire that? Because that's an innate desire of one's godly soul. I want to have oneness with my source, oneness with my creator. And so I'm thirsty for that. I'm hungry for that. And the reason why I'm going to study Torah and do a mitzvah is to quench that thirst and to be able to achieve my goal. That's very powerful. That sounds very altruistic, but yet it still falls short of true altruism, because at the end of the day, it's still a personal quest. I want to be connected with my creator, and I'm doing the mitzvah, studying Torah, to fulfill my quest. The ultimate tzaddik, the ultimate ben aliyah, superior person of elevated status, doesn't even have that desire. He's not looking to quench their own thirst, their own spiritual holy needs. They're only looking to do something good for God, to do an act of kindness for God. As the Zohar says, Eizehu Chasid, who is the pious person? That's the term being used here for the true tzaddik, complete tzaddik, someone who does chesed, kindness. The word chesed and chesed are linked together. Does kindness with their creator. The word for creator is kono, which in Hebrew can also mean can mean a nest. Does kindness with their nest, meaning a kindness for the source of where they come from, their soul, meaning from God. They're looking to do God a favor, not to do themselves a favor. What does that mean that when you study Torah or do a mitzvah, you can do God a favor? Because godliness, in its essence, is oneness. There is only one God, and in the existence of that one God, there's only oneness in the entire world. But the moment that God started to create a world, even the highest spiritual worlds, of course, our lowly physical world, this state of oneness was threatened. It was broken down. Now there existed an otherness. Now there was a sense of separation, a sense of fragmentation within this world. And so true tzaddik wants to repair that breakdown, that fragmentation, and restore the oneness. And so by doing a mitzvah, what they want to achieve is they just want to be kind to God, help him repair that oneness. And so they want to draw down The infinite light of Hashem into this world through the mitzvah, and drawing down godness into this world is taking all of these fragmented things in this world, things that seem to be other than God, seem to represent things that are not godly, and to convert them and transform them and show how every single element and layer of creation is truly just a projection of godliness, and that restores the state of oneness. And that's why this tzaddik is also called Bane aliyah, because their motivation is truly elevated and altruistic, not for any personal need, but only to do a kindness with God. In the conclusion of today's chapter, the Alter Rebbe provides a very Kabbalistic explanation, telling us that these two explanations of these superior people, one, that their goal is to elevate darkness into light and bitterness into sweetness, and they do that through the transformation of their divine worship. And number two, that their motivation is completely altruistic. They're not just two separate explanations, but they actually complement each other. One causes the other. And the way the Alter Rebbe explains that, and we're just going to do this very briefly, is that we have in Kabbalah these two concepts called man and mad, which stand for mayim nukvin, feminine waters, and mayim duchrin, masculine waters. The feminine and the masculine, just like down here in this world, the female is the recipient and the male is the giver in any act of intimacy. So too, we, in other words, the creations and the humans in this world are like the feminine part of this relationship between us and God is the male. God is the provider, the giver, and we are the receiver. What happens in a true intimate bond, even in a sexual way, is that through the stimulation of the feminine waters of the female, that triggers the male in a way to be able to provide. So therefore, through the performance of the tzaddik, in a very powerful way of transformation, the tzaddik is converting all of that which appears to be the opposite of godliness and goodness into something good that stimulates and triggers the ultimate highest level of drawing down of God's divine light into this world. And that powerful infinite light will be able to convert everything in this world back into a state of oneness, so that everything that exists is clearly visible. It's part of God's plan, part of God's creation, and nothing is outside of the border. Nothing is outside of the story of the narrative of God's oneness and purpose of creation. And that concludes the discussion about the tzaddik. What can we take away from here? We can take away from here the goals of trying to convert and transform what appears to be negative from our bestial side and channel our own drives and impulses into something holier. And we can also try to always reflect on our motivations in life and what inspires us and what triggers us to do good things. And we shouldn't have ulterior motives. We should try to have the ultimate altruistic motive of doing that which is right because it's right, because it connects us to God, and even more so because it does a kindness to God, repairing the brokenness in this world. Shavua Tov, have a beautiful day. God bless you.